It's one of the most famous, most analyzed, and most mysterious songs ever written. You know the one I'm talking about, Don McLean's 8.5-minute masterpiece, American Pie. We can all sing along to it, but what is it actually about? Well, today we're going to finally unpack this musical epic.
You know, the song starts out almost like a fairy tale, doesn't it? A long, long time ago, I can still remember how that music used to make me smile. It's designed to pull us right back to a time that felt simpler, more innocent, a time filled with hope, right before everything was about to change.
So what's really buried in these lyrics? American Pie isn't just a song, it's more like a poem, a journey through one of the most chaotic decades in American history. And the whole thing, all 8 minutes of it, really hinges on a single, heartbreaking loss that changed music forever.
To really get this song, we have to go right back to the start, to the tragic event that the entire story is anchored to. This is the moment that really kicks off a whole decade of turmoil.
And you know, that line, it's not just some poetic flourish, it's a real, personal memory. Don McLean was a kid with a paper route, and he's remembering a specific headline on a cold February morning. A headline that didn't just shake him, but shook the entire music world to its absolute core.
Okay, so here it is, the big one. The event the entire song is built around. On February 3rd, 1959, a small plane went down in an Iowa cornfield, tragically killing 3 of rock and roll's brightest young stars, Buddy Holly, Richie Valens, and the Big Bopper. And with this one tragedy, McLean gives us that immortal phrase that defines the song, "The day the music died."
And get this, even the title itself is this huge symbol. Yeah, there's a rumor that American Pie was the name of the crashed plane, but it's much bigger than that. It's really seen as a symbol for that wholesome apple pie idealism of 1950s America, an ideal that was just about to be completely shattered.
So let's break down that chorus we all know by heart. The Chevy and the levee, that's pure 1950s Americana. But when the levee was dry, it's a metaphor for a culture that suddenly felt empty, uninspired. The good old boys are mourning this loss. And that final haunting line, "This'll be the day that I die," well, that's a direct quote from Buddy Holly's own hit song, "That'll Be the Day." It ties the whole chorus right back to the tragedy.
So, with the founding fathers of rock and roll gone, the stage is empty, the 1960s dawn, and a whole new generation of musicians arrives to fill that void. And McLean, well, he gives them all code names. So let's meet the new cast of characters.
All right, so who are all these mystery figures? The jester is pretty much universally agreed to be Bob Dylan, the new folk poet with that distinctive voice from You and Me. The king, well, that's Elvis Presley, of course, whose thorny crown was left behind when he went off to join the army. And the quartet you hear practicing in the park, you guessed it, that would be the Beatles.
And this is where the song is just so brilliant, right? It's constantly weaving the music together with these huge historical moments. The line, "The courtroom was adjourned," is a direct reference to the fact that JFK's assassin, Lee Harvey Oswald, was murdered himself before he could ever stand trial. And in the same way, McLean references the massive backlash after John Lennon claimed the Beatles were more popular than Jesus, which led to protests and record burnings all over the country.
Okay, so as we move into the mid-60s, you can feel the mood start to shift. That early optimism of the decade begins to curdle into something a lot darker, a lot more chaotic, right as the so-called Summer of Love is supposed to be kicking off.
And then we get this line. And wow, it's maybe one of the most chilling in the whole song. "Helter Skelter." Now that's a direct reference to a Beatles song, but its meaning got twisted into something absolutely horrific.
The connection here is just bone-chilling. The cult leader Charles Manson became obsessed with the Beatles' White Album, and he somehow believed their song Helter Skelter was a secret prophecy about an apocalyptic race war. He used this twisted fantasy to incite the infamous Tate LaBianca murders, even having his followers scrawl the song's title in blood at the crime scenes. It was this terrifying moment where pop music collided with unimaginable violence. The second half of the decade was just a whirlwind. I mean, first we see the jester, Bob Dylan, have a motorcycle crash in '66 that takes him out of the spotlight for a while. The next year, the Beatles change everything with Sgt. Pepper. By '68, social unrest just boils over in Chicago, with protesters and police clashing in the streets. And it all culminates in '69, with a generation feeling lost in space, literally watching the moon landing, many of them while they were gathered at Woodstock.
So if Woodstock was the big dream of the 1960s, what comes next is the nightmare. The song now moves to its climax, focusing on a single concert that violently, and I mean violently, slammed the door on that whole era of peace and love. So who is Jack Flash? This one's a pretty direct reference to the Rolling Stones' hit Jumping Jack Flash. The nimble, quick Jack on the candlestick is none other than their legendary frontman, Mick Jagger.
This all comes to a head at the Altamont Free Concert, which was supposed to be the Woodstock of the West. But the decision to hire the Hells Angels for security and paying them in beer was a complete catastrophe. As the Rolling Stones played Sympathy for the Devil, violence just erupted in the crowd, and a young man named Meredith Hunter was stabbed to death right near the stage. In that one single brutal moment, the peace and love dream of Woodstock was completely shattered.
And that is what he means by that lyric. At Altamont, the violence wasn't protesters against the police, it was the counterculture literally turning on itself. The peace and love generation was lost, and in all that chaos, it really felt like Satan was laughing with delight. The dream was officially and truly dead.
So the final verses of the song, they're really an epilogue. It's this somber, quiet reflection on everything that was lost in the fiery collapse of the 1960s.
The losses just keep piling up. The Girl Who Sang the Blues is a clear nod to the powerful, tragic Janis Joplin who died of an overdose in 1970. And when McLean goes back to the sacred store where he first fell in love with music, he finds that the pure, simple rock and roll of the 50s, it's just gone, forgotten, replaced by the much more complex and often cynical music of the new decade. And this is the final devastating image of the song. The Holy Trinity itself, the ultimate symbol of faith and hope and order, has just given up. They're leaving. They've packed their bags and caught the last train out. There's nothing left for them here.
And what this all points to is this profound sense of spiritual loss. When he sings that the church bells all were broken, it's a metaphor for a generation that started with so much promise, but in McLean's view had lost its way, lost its faith. The things it held sacred, love, peace, maybe even God himself, were gone, leaving this empty void.
So, what does a 50-year-old song really mean for us today? I mean, it's a time capsule, for sure, but the themes are just timeless, aren't they? Idealism turning to cynicism, unity fracturing into division, and people losing faith in the things they once held sacred. It really makes you wonder, what parts of this story, this epic of hope and chaos, still feel a little too true right now?